Today we're going to look at examples of some chaturtamshas of very wealthy people. So people who are financially fortunate. Okay, starting with this first chart, let's look at Mercury. That's always the first planet to look at in the chaturtamsha. And obviously Mercury is looking pretty good. It's in its own Rashi. And Mercury in the Rashi chart is conjunct with the Sun, as it is in the Hora Varga. But first of all, Mercury is good because it's in its own sign. Now, aspects to Mercury, well, it's conjunct the Sun. The Sun is in a neutral sign, so the Sun is impacting Mercury a little bit, okay, in a natural neutral sign. So it's not ideal. And again, the Sun's conjunct Mercury in the Rashi chart, so that's putting some agitation onto Mercury. Mercury is aspected by the Moon, who's in a natural neutral sign. So Mercury, where's Mercury? Mercury's aspected by the Moon, so in a natural neutral sign. So some strength taken again from Mercury. Now, since the Moon is in a neutral sign, it's only going to give 50% of its, only be able to take away 50% of its influence to Mercury. So that 46 gets cut back to about 23. It's aspected by Jupiter. Jupiter, however, is in a natural enemy sign, so it can't do any good. And he wouldn't anyway. Aspected by his friend Venus, who's in a natural friend sign, so he gets little help from Venus. But then he gets some help from Saturn. He doesn't get help from Saturn. Saturn's a neutral Mercury, right? So, Mercury's in a great sign, dignity being in its own sign. But it does suffer a little bit from the Sun and somewhat from the Moon. Ends up still being a little bit more auspicious. Okay? Now, then Mercury is also the lord of two important bhavas in this chart. It's the lord of the 4th and the lord of the 7th. The 4th has to do with, the fortune, the wealth, real estate, stocks. 7th house has to do with buying, trading, and selling. So Mercury is nice there. Okay? But, it's nice that Mercury rules these two houses. It'd be better if Mercury had some more friend influence to it. It does come out being more, have a little more strength and it's beat up. But it's still pretty good Mercury. Okay? Now, one of the things that makes Mercury nice, though, and you don't see it in this chart, is that Mercury in the Rashi chart is in the first house where it has full Digbala. Then Mercury is retrograde. Okay? Now, three things that give a planet a lot of power always are being close to exaltation, being opposite the Sun or retrograde, or being in its Digbala. Okay? And so that gives Mercury some more strength. And we can see that if we pull up the Shadbala, we can see that Mercury ends up being the strongest planet in the chart at 583 points. And a lot of that is because he's got really excellent Digbala. So Mercury is a really strong planet in general. And so the other planets, like the Moon and Sun, which are taking some strength away from Mercury, Mercury has a lot to start with, so he still ends up being really strong, okay, or, strong enough. Then he rules two of these important bhavas. So it's a pretty good Mercury. Now the 4th bhava itself, looking at the important bhavas, the 4th bhava is influenced by the Sun, who's in an enemy sign, so the Sun is hurting the 4th, by the Moon in an enemy sign, so the Moon's hurting the 4th, but then by Mars in a great friend sign, by Mercury in its own sign. So it picks up a lot of extra points there. Okay? Then, let's see, Jupiter is aspecting from a great enemy, so hurting. Venus and Saturn from neutral, so they're not helping or hurting the 4th house. But still, if we add up the positives, we get 45 and 36. Points of aspect, which is about 81 compared to 35, 5, 40, and Jupiter 15 to 55. So there is more good influences to the 4th house. Um, the seventh house, the house of business and trade, fortune through business, is hurt by the Sun to 30, helped by Mars by 60, Mercury by 32. Venus is neutral, dignity is not making a difference, but 92 compared to 30. So the seventh house is really a nice house. Then the first house, the other important house in the Varga, is hurt by the Moon to 53, hurt by Mars to 51, and then not helped or hindered by Saturn. Okay, so this is 104 points of trouble. However, to that, we also have to consider that in the Rashi chart, Sun and Mercury are in the first house, so influencing that first house. Mercury, of course, is going to help a lot because it's it's strong in its own sign in the chapter Tamsha. The Sun, however, is going to hurt because it's in an enemy sign. Okay, so the first house is not really good. So this person really wasn't unusually fortunate with their body. They weren't, their body, their appearance didn't help them in their fortune. Okay, in fact, they had some more physical, lacks than average, as shown here. So they really weren't that fortunate with respect to their body. But with Mercury being pretty good, and both the fourth and seventh houses being good, the person was still very financially fortunate, especially in respect to buying and selling investments, which is seventh house. So a very good businessman, a very effective businessman, is someone who made a big fortune through business. Now you'll also notice that Mercury, in addition to being this really important planet, also happens to rule Saturn, the second lord of wealth, Saturn, the 11th lord of income, and Jupiter, the lord of wealth and income. So the strength that Mercury has can help produce better finances. Then the second lord, to see just how fortunate they'll be financially, is Saturn. Saturn is aspected by the Sun, who's in a natural neutral sign, so hurting him a bit. Is aspected by Mars, so hurt by Mars, but helped by a really strong Mercury and helped by a strong Venus. And these are actually both stronger influences because the Sun's in a natural neutral, so he's not going to hurt Saturn that much. Mars is hurting a lot. But then Mercury is helping a lot. Mercury's in its own sign, and Venus is helping a lot because he's in a natural friend sign. So comes out a little bit ahead for Saturn here, the second lord. And of course, Saturn's lord is in very good shape. And that, of course, is Mercury. So this is a chart that is of someone who's really made a lot of fortune, a lot of wealth, a lot of stored wealth, which is fourth house, a lot of money in the bank, a lot of wealth in stocks, which again is a fourth house thing, and who made that money through trade, through buying and selling. But not a person who, through business basically, but not a person who was really fortunate with their body. Okay? You also see the Lagna Lord in the Rashi chart, or Lagna Lord of the chapter Tamsha is Jupiter, which is joined with Saturn. So it also gets starved by Saturn. So physically not fortunate at all, in fact a bit unfortunate, but still a strong enough chart to create really good financial fortune. Okay? Now Mercury is in Sunat Kamara. Okay? And of course Sunat Kamara is the ever youth or ever new Rishi, the fortune that's always new, always interesting. And one of this person's abilities was that they were able to make a lot of money through many various financial enterprises. So there was always new things they were working on. This wasn't the type of businessman that had a store or made one product and just chugged away with it. They were always, selling, buying, and dealing in new things, completely different things, as we'd expect by this Mercury. And Mercury is so important because he rules the fourth, he rules the seventh, and he's the important planet of fortune in this Varga. So we can really see in his life, his fortune came from many new and varied things, and being very sort of creative. This person was always coming up with, new ways to invest their fortune in order to create new fortune and so on. Okay, just as we'd expect with the Sanat Kumara. So this is an example of chart that, though not perfect, has some strength to it, has enough strength to it to make the person financially fortunate. Okay? And it shows the importance of having a good dignified Mercury. When we look at the rest of this chart, there's not that many great, the dignities aren't that great. Having a good dignified Mercury makes a big difference in the Chapter Tamsha, as long as it's not killed by other planets. And now this Mercury does get hurt by other planets, but it doesn't get killed by other planets, so it still has a lot of fruit to give. Okay, this next person has Mercury in its Mula Trikona between 15 and 20 degrees of Virgo. So another really strong Mercury. Okay. Mercury in the Rashi chart is conjunct Saturn. So Saturn's going to starve Mercury a bit. But not as much as Mercury is Garvita, proud, because Saturn's in a natural friend sign. So his capacity to influence Mercury is 50%. So he can starve Mercury halfway. Mercury's capacity to produce is 100% because he's Garvita, he's proud. So Mercury still comes out to be twice as good as he is problematical. Then Mercury is influenced by the moon, who's going to hurt him to about 40 points of aspect, but half of that is what's going to count because the moon's in a natural friend sign, so only half his weight. Well, he can only throw half his weight around. Mars is sleeping. Jupiter is a neutral, so not making a big difference. So Mercury comes out a little bit ahead here. He still comes out being proud, luckily. Okay? Then the fourth lord is Saturn. Saturn's in a natural friend sign, so picks up some mudita, delight there. And his friend is really strong by being in, it's Mula Trikona, so that helps Saturn. Saturn's influence hurt by the moon. Saturn is hurt by Mars. Saturn is indifferent by Jupiter, but helped by Mercury a lot because Mercury also conjunct Saturn. So the fourth lord is really quite nice, and that really helps this person create fortune, okay? In fact, one of the things this person was very, very fortunate in is they had really were able to acquire and own a very, very beautiful house. Again, the real strong fourth house going on here. Then the seventh house is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is in an enemy sign, so it's sleeping. It's influenced by the sun, who's sleeping, so he can't help, by the moon, who can help, by Mars, who's sleeping, who can't help, by Mercury, who is his enemy, and by Venus, his enemy, and Saturn, his neutral. So this is a starved Jupiter. It's not a good seventh lord here in the Chaturtamsha. For this reason, this person, when they went into their Jupiter dasha, had a lot of business problems, as we'd expect. That's when fortune sort of left them, was during Jupiter. So they did struggle in business. They had a lot more, they had their greatest business success in the dasha of Mercury, as we'd expect, because Mercury is the important planet in the Chaturtamsha. It rules Jupiter, the seventh lord, so it makes up for it. So this is a person who fails trying to make a fortune through Jupiter, but Mercury saves the fourth bhava and the Chaturtamsha and gives a lot of success and wealth in Mercury dasha. That was the most wealthy period. Saturn dasha was also very wealthy, and we've seen Saturn's the fourth lord, which is well situated, thanks to the conjunction of Mercury in the Rashi and to the fact that Saturn's in a natural friend sign. But Jupiter dasha had its failings because it's just not good in the Chaturtamsha. Okay? Now, if you look at the houses, the at first, okay, if you look at the houses, the fourth bhava is influenced by the sun in a neutral sign, so indifferent. By the moon in a friend sign, so the moon helps, the fourth. By Mercury in Mula Trikona, so that helps. So we've got about 60, 70 points of good influences. Then Jupiter's in a great enemy sign, so hurts to 41. And Venus hurts to 14. So that takes a big chunk out of it, but then the fourth is also aspected by its lord to 46 points. So now we got quite a few more good points. So the fourth house is better than average, quite a bit better than average. And so definitely fortune can be produced in real estate and stocks and bank money, all of which this person had. The seventh house in the Saptamsha, well, influenced by Sun to 55, but the Sun's in a neutral sign, so not going to help. By the Moon to 22 points, which will help, because the Moon's in a great friend sign. By Mars, who's in a neutral sign, so not going to help. By Mercury, who helps a lot, to 44 points. By Venus, who hurts a little. And by Saturn, who's in a neutral sign. So the fourth is, the seventh is really good. So you see this person has good fortune in business and trade because it has a great seventh house. It can make money that way. But in the dasha of the seventh lord, Jupiter, who's starved, they starve in business during that time, and they start a business that actually goes out of business. You know, they completely fail, or they literally are forced out of business. But their seventh house is still really good. So in the dashas of other planets, they're able to have a successful business. Starting with the dasha of Saturn, which was really good because Saturn rules the fourth. And then Mercury was particularly good because Mercury rules the fourth lord and the seventh lord. So it's a total Chaturtamsha planet, and it's Mercury to boot. Okay? Now, since this person has a good Mercury, this person is probably going to be physically fortunate as well because Mercury rules the Lagna. The Lagna is influenced by the Moon to 32 points, which is favorable. Mars is neutral. Jupiter's 26 points. And Jupiter is in an enemy sign, so that's hurting it. So right now they're only 6 points ahead on the Lagna. However, in the Rasi chart, Mercury's in the Lagna, and Mercury's in its Mula Trikona, so that helps a lot. Saturn's in the Lagna too, but he's in a neutral sign, so he won't hurt. So thanks to this helpful Mercury and this helpful Moon, this person was physically fortunate. And they were attractive looking. They had a good, healthy, solid body. They didn't give them troubles. They weren't a fortunately wealthy person who suffered physically. They had the typical Mercury qualities of friendliness and the qualities that sparks interest in other people. People who've got nice Mercuries influencing their body, these are people we just find interesting. When we see them, we just somehow find them interesting, and it arouses our curiosity about them, and we want to get to know them. So this person has those qualities, and we had a fortunate, physical body in both in appearance and health. So this person was not only fortunate financially and in business, as was the other person that we saw. They were also very fortunate in, physically as well. Okay, so quite a nice chart for this person. Okay, looking at the lords. Sananda was the lord, the deity of Mercury. Okay, and Sananda is the fortune that gives bliss, that gives happiness. Okay, and one thing about this person really knew how to use their fortune to enjoy themselves. With respect, like to their house, they really built what they really wanted, what was really going to make them happy. So they put a lot of money into it, and and they put a lot of money into things that a lot of people would have thought trivial in the house, but it was just things that made them really happy and joyful about it. So they really made their house a place to really enjoy themselves, because that's how they spent their money. So this person knew how to enjoy spending their money. The fortune wasn't just I've got all this money that's going to last me forever and I don't have to worry about anything. But they really use their money to enjoy themselves in life. And because Mercury's in such good condition, to enjoy themselves in healthy ways. Mercury's in Mula Trikona, not to enjoy themselves in depraved ways, but enjoy themselves with the good things in life that are not going to be damaging. Was very much a quality of this person. And again, looking at the Mercury is always the best sort of deity to start looking at, okay, in general. So I always sort of pay attention to that one in particular. On some other charts, we'll look at more of the deities. Right now, we're just looking at charts that financially were fortunate, okay? And we'll get into the deities in different areas of life in the next video. But right now, just the easy thing of how financially fortunate is this person. Okay, this person here, at first glance, you see this chart is completely different, okay, than those other ones. Look, starting at Mercury. Mercury's in a natural enemy sign, but that's a watery sign, so he's thirsty. He's not starved, but he's thirsty. And this person was very thirsty for fortune, okay. In fact, this person grew up in a very wealthy family. Her dad had lots of corporations and businesses, this very, very wealthy father. But she was still feeling very starved with respect to fortune because of how, her father managed everything, and because of her own abilities. You'll see that Mercury rules the 7th house, the house of business and trade, an important house, and Mercury's thirsty. So Mercury's really not promising. Then Mercury's influenced by the moon to 15 points, who's going to take some more. Put some more thirst onto Mercury, by Mars a neutral, by Jupiter a neutral, and by Saturn a neutral. Then Mercury's conjunct the Sun in the Rashi chart over here. It's conjunct the Sun and Venus. So Sun is going to really agitate Mercury because it's exalted. See that really strong father presence really bothering the Mercury. And Venus is going to help at least. Venus is in a natural neutral sign. But overall, this is a pretty bad Mercury. It's an agitated, thirsty Mercury, which is a little bit of delight from Venus. So this person didn't have any business acumen. They didn't have any capacity for making their own fortune. Mercury represents your skills and abilities, and 7th house is their ability for trade and interchange. And they didn't have any of that to make their fortune with. It just wasn't there. They were really agitated because of how their father dealt with the money. There was always family tensions going on as a result of the father having all the power in the chart. And we see that when we see this really strong sun, which is the father. Then the 10th lord, which is the father, is ruled by Mars, who's also really strong. And then Saturn is the other strong planet. And Saturn is in the Rashi chart, Saturn is the lord of the 10th, the father, and the 9th, parents. So every possible thing that bears on the father, is super strong in this chart, and it's a cruel malefic planet. And some of those things, namely the sun, is really agitating Mercury. So their fortune was really agitated. There was, like I said, always things being played off between them and their siblings. It was just a really frustrating, life. They had all this money, but they didn't even want to get money from their father in a way because it was just always such a power struggle and power tripping thing to have it. Mercury was very, very agitated. So we don't see a good Mercury here. Okay? Mercury's in Sananda. Is in Sananda, Chaturtamsha, ruled by Rishi Sananda. So Sananda is, again, that having joy, consciousness of bliss, having fun. So this person just thought money was for having fun and to do enjoyable and interesting things. But they didn't get to do a whole lot of that because Mercury's so trashed. Okay, but that was their approach to it. Okay. Their father's approach, which we can get a better idea for by looking at the sun, is in Sanaka, which exists from the beginning. Okay, and so their father had a strong idea that money was something that you have and you keep it. Exists from the beginning. Okay, whatever you have, you try to hold on to it. So they didn't have that same idea about them where they wanted to spend money being really a good idea. Now, Mars is also representing the father, ruling the 10th bhava in the Chaturtamsha. And Mars is strong, and it's in Sananda, the having joy thing. So we can see that the father did experience joy around their fortune, but Mars is a neutral to Mercury, and so he's not really sharing that joy with Mercury, which is this person's innate capacity for fortune. So you can see there's not a lot of nice things onto Mercury. It's not a good Mercury. So there wasn't a lot of room for joy and stuff like that. Okay, so Mercury's bad. Let's look at the houses though. The 4th house is aspected by the sun, who's exalted. So that's great. Okay, aspected by the moon in its own sign. Aspected by Mercury, who's going to hurt the 4th, because Mercury's in a great enemy sign. Moon, is in a neutral sign, so can't help the 4th. Jupiter's in a neutral, so can't help it. Venus is going to hurt it to 9 points. Saturn and Mars are not aspecting, but they both conjunct the 4th bhava cusp in the Rashi, so they're influencing the 4th. They're both in their own sign. Saturn and Mars is creating a lot of fortune onto the 4th bhava and making this person have a lot of fortune. Mars is Sananda, exists from the beginning. You bet the person had money from the beginning because of their father. Okay? Now the problem is Saturn and Mars are conjunct in the Rashi chart. And whenever you see Saturn-Mars conjunctions, it creates a lot of frustration. So while they had fortune from the beginning, and while both Saturn and Mars are really bolstering that 4th house and caused them to grow up in a rich environment, it was a frustrating environment at the same time because Saturn and Mars are starving each other, right? Which is their nature when they're conjunct. And so the person definitely had father issues, but they had fortune in their life. Mercury being bad, they didn't have any ability to make fortune. The 7th lord being Mercury, in bad shape. They didn't have the capacity for making fortune. But 4th house is fantastically strong due to Saturn and Mars conjuncted in the Rashi and being in good dignity in the Chaturtamsha. So a lot of money. The 7th house is influenced by Sun to 23 points, which helps, by Mars, hurt by Mercury, helped by Mars, hurt by Venus, helped by Saturn. So the 7th house is mediocre, but the Lord totally sucks. Okay? But still, there's a little room for making some investments for this person, but not huge. And that's sort of how they did. They did have some small, successful investments, but nothing huge, nothing great. Mercury's the investor is just not good. There's just a little bit of room for that because of the 7th house. But the 4th house is really, really fortunate. The Lagna is Rashi aspected by Sun, which is helping, Moon, which is neutral, planetary aspected by Sun, which is helping because he's exalted, Moon, which is neutral, Mercury, who's hurting, Jupiter, who's the Lord, and so helping a bit, Venus, who's hurting, and Saturn, who's helping. So an average, slightly better than average if we added up all the numbers, Lagna. So the person was fortunate in a sense that they were physically more robust and healthy than average. They never really had a lot of physical problems. They had a fortune of a healthy physical body. Appearance-wise, they were about average, maybe a little bit less. One of their reasons is because the planets that give the health were Sun and Saturn, which are cruel malefic planets, which are not going to ever make you as attractive as the previous chart we looked at, who had Mercury really helping the first house. The benefics helping the first house makes you more attractive. Malefics helping the first house give you physical strength and a sense of power to your presence, and help you in that context with your fortunate body, but not so much in the attractive part. Okay. So they were relatively fortunate with their body, all in all, a little bit more. But their great fortune was a wonderful fourth house. This chart has a fantastic fourth house. So as a result, they grew up wealthy. They eventually got wealth, not through their own ability, not through trade, not through that terrible Mercury. They did it through, they did it through inheriting it from their father, basically. Okay, they always had some, an allowance from their father, which came at a lot of frustration, as we've talked about, because of the frustration situations that we talked about in this chart. But someone who, when their father passed away, they, had a lot of money after that and went and bought himself a little house in a very nice area, and just did what they loved doing with their life. Okay? But they never really created their own fortune. And we can see that with Saturn and Mars giving that fortune to the fourth house, and both being father planets. So fortune came from the father for this person's chart. And again, the strong exalted sun. So this is an interesting Varga chart where you've got terrible Mercury, pretty mediocre seventh, but really strong planets, 3 planets in good dignity. And those planets, 2 of them are strongly influencing the fourth house. So the person has fortune, a big bank account, plenty of stocks in their father's corporations and businesses. So the person is really, really well off. Okay? But in a completely different way as the other 2 people who had great Mercury, good 7th houses and good 4th houses, who made a lot of money through a lot of in a fun mercurial business success way. This person got a lot of money through dealing with frustration, Saturn and Mars, with her father and son. So malefics will give just as much wealth as benefics. It just won't be as fun getting the wealth as when benefics give it. And that's the biggest difference between this chart and the other 2 we looked at. Okay, thank you.